ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
This conversation includes content that may be sensitive for some listeners. Please take care when listening.
Paul Field grew up on the outskirts of Sydney in a big, tight-knit Irish Catholic family who loved music. Paul comes from a long line of family musical outfits, from girl bands who played at rowdy rural dances in the 1920s to a great aunt who was a vaudeville performer called Queenie Paul. Paul and his brothers formed their own band and started escaping from boarding school to play gigs in Sydney's King's Cross when they were still teenagers. And Paul's band, the Cockroaches, were at one point crowned the hardest working band in Australia for the crazy number of gigs they did in 1987. The brothers called it quits on the Cockroaches, not long after a terrible tragedy for Paul's young family. A few years later, they got the family band back together again in a different way. This time playing to the screams of wild, chaotic toddlers at strictly alcohol-free venues, and they conquered the world. And today, Paul is an ambassador for Sid's Red Nose Day. Hello, Paul.
G'day.
You spent the early years, like I said, in Western Sydney in Blacktown.
Yeah.
Tell me about what your dad did for work.
Well, he was a pharmacist, and we lived in Lalor Park, and very working class area. In fact, it was a housing commission area. So he's very busy in the days before supermarkets would sell makeup and so on. The local chemist, Dad did. So it was a roaring business. And of course, with all the young kids and babies, he did very well. So very busy and very much a part of the community.
What were his views when he encountered drug abuse in the community?
Well, my dad in 1969, he was 36, he had a heart attack. And he literally flatlined. And thank goodness, Blacktown Hospital had just opened up and he was rushed to the hospital. And as they took Dad in, the doctor said to Mum, "Mrs. Field, you must know he can't survive." I was like, bloody hell. And Dad, once he did survive, it really had an impact on him. And he used to say to us when he was doing public work, "I've got to pay the rent for surviving," right? So the kids he used to weigh eventually grew up and he started noticing around the area that drugs were becoming a problem. So he started drug counselling, dispensed methadone to addicts, would often go to families and counsel them after someone had an overdose. So we had a very real education in drug use and abuse at an age when most didn't. And having witnessed families that he knew, good kids who ended up taking a wrong turn, his mantra was, if there's something you love doing, unless it's like drug use, go for it. And so with us, we come from a family of people who love music. And we, as teenagers, just live for music.
So when you were in the chemist with him, what kind of things did you see back in those days?
Well, some of the clients that he would counsel come in and do a fake cough and ask for Fenzadil, which was a cough mixture that had a lot of codeine in it. And they were probably metres away outside the chemist and they just down it like a shot. And so this is the education I'm getting. But Dad always treated him with respect and would occasionally say, "Mate, do you really want this?" Da-da-da. But once you have methadone in your pharmacy, you become a target. And he was held up. The shop got held up a few times. And the final time before Dad stopped dispensing methadone, guys came in with a gun and held him up. And one of them grabbed one of the young women out front and dragged it to back where Dad was and said, "Give us whatever they ask for, money, no doubt, and drugs, or she gets it." And then they turned the rifle towards Dad. And Dad's from Cobar, real bushy. And he was just furious at that, right, at what they did. Dad grabbed the rifle and thumped the guy, right?
Oh.
Yeah, Cobar boy. And then they laid into him, but he had their gun. They raced off. And the Cobar boy raced after them. And to quote Dad, I had the bastard lined up to be a quadriplegic. Right? He's Cobar, all right? Okay, and he's dead now, so it's okay, I can talk. And luckily for everyone, there was nothing in the chamber. But it was enough for Mum and Dad to have a chat to go, you can't keep dispensing methadone. It's now dangerous. And so he stopped. But it goes to show you there's a few things from there. He's a real man of the community. He also, what you love, you should do. And because we love music, at one stage there, we were Rolling Stones fanatics, and a new Stones live album came out called Love You Live. And we were at a boarding school at this time because he went to one. And he drove the new cassette down during our lunch hour and played it to us in the car. I still remember this day. It was like, whoa! In the era when you had to wait to get a record or a cassette. Great man.
So your dad was from Cobar. Was there a lot of music in the pub and in the family house when he grew up? Did he have a lot of music in his life himself?
Yeah, so his mother, Kathleen, was from a family of 7 to 9 children, the Condons, and she and her sisters played in a local band for dancers because, Cobar back in the 30s and 20s, there wasn't much else. And my grandmother, Kathleen, would play the piano to accompany silent movies. How cool is that?
Oh, that's great. How about on the maternal side of the family? Your mum, were there musicians there as well?
Oh, yeah. Well, Mum herself used to drive her siblings crazy because she learnt piano but would practice it every waking moment spare, even when she was learning to type and all the rest of it. And it was her great auntie that was Queenie Paul. And Mum used to quote us, way back that learning to play a musical instrument was as important as learning to read and write. And she was the organist at the church. Anytime there was a funeral, even though she had all these kids, the nuns would call her and she'd go down and play. She'd play on Christmas Eve, midnight mass. And with 7 kids, she would play records to us, musicals, from Man of La Mancha to Camelot to the Beatles singles. And, I don't know if she's confabulating this, but she reckons Anthony, the youngest, she'd sing, "She Loves You," and he, in perfect pitch, she tells us, as a youngster, would go, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And I think, okay, he's just the youngest, that's why she's saying that. But anyway, music was just totally a part of our life.
And were you kids expected to perform at big family events as well?
Yeah, actually, yeah. They became our first gigs after doing Stedfords and, the school shows. We moved to Kellyville, which is a big property, and we'd have big family get-togethers. And we were kind of the comic relief. I mean that fair dinkum, because we didn't have the skills, but we had fun. So we would literally mime Elvis records. And then when we could play, Dad would go, "Come boys," and we'd start playing something. And once he thought it was going off the rails, he'd go, "Okay, what else?" So we really got the gist for what we'd eventually do at gigs. And we had no fear of trying anything, even if we didn't totally know it. It was very much a punk ethos.
Yeah. But is there also, being a big old Irish Catholic family, was there also that Irish folk song tradition in the family, an Australian bush music tradition as well?
Oh, yeah, very much so. And Dad, who for many years said Ned Kelly was the first Australian saint. That's how full on he was. Oh, yeah. And in fact, one of the earliest dates Mum and Dad went on, how's this for the old days, before the movie, they'd play God Save the Queen, right, which was Australia's national anthem at one stage. And everyone stood up. And Mum was from working class glebe. Her dad was a deckhand on the ferry, so she wasn't a posh girl. And Dad grabbed her skirt and pulled down and said, "Don't stand up, think of the dead Irish." And she went, "What?" She didn't know it was... So, yeah, there's the short answer on that. We heard a lot of Irish songs.
Right.
Yeah.
My dad used to say to me, Australia, when I was growing up, was a funny country, son. He said, the quickest way to start a fight was to call someone a pom, and the quickest way to end it was to play God Save the Queen.
There you go. There you go.
Now, your dad, your lovely dad, so much of a music fiend, he took you to a Susie Quattro gig when you were still in primary school. Oh, man, what was that gig like? Do you remember it?
I do, purely because it was just what everything a gig should be. I was literally in primary school, I think 5th or 6th class, right? We didn't have gig clothes in those days. I was wearing my Patrician Brothers Blacktown jersey top. And I don't know how many of us went. I don't know if all 7, but a big mob of us did. It was a Hordern Pavilion. He dropped us off. There are your tickets. I'll wait here. As soon as it's over, you come out, I'll be still parked here. And There was a bit of a bikey vibe.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
She and the band are all in black leather. She's tiny, but
Yes.
she's all in black leather, and she's got this really low slung bass that she's playing while
That's
she's
it.
singing.
She was as tough
Oh,
as.
yeah.
And there were bikies at the gig. So I'm there going, God help us. It was part terrifying, but euphoric, and it was awesome.
How did your band, The Cockroaches, get started then, Paul?
So in our spare time, we jammed, but more so at home. It was the ultimate dream. Wouldn't it be great one day to do a gig, right? That was it. We would have been content to do a single gig. And so while boys are still at school, there'd be fundraising things. You could host an event to raise money, as I used to say, for the missions, right? So we said, great, we'll put a gig on, right? And we called ourselves The Cockroaches. Was a nom de plume for the Stones when they do warm-up gigs.
Oh, right. I was thinking you were going to, that was like kind of an ugly version of the Beatles or something like that.
It works on every level.
Yeah, it does, right.
And also people don't forget the name, right?
Yeah.
And so we had this little theaterette. I kid you not, we must have charged 5 cents a head and packed out with other kids. And the brothers just let us be. They kind of walked out the door and it was, this is awesome. And so they were our starter gigs, and they naturally flowed then to school dances. So the audience was our age. And then once I left school in 78, I must have had a bit of a hide on me. I was 17, and I booked us at the Australian Heritage Hotel in King's Cross. And I just said to the guy in there, look, I noticed you don't have bands on Sunday Arvo. How about we play for free? And if you dig us, next time you pay. Right. And of course, all our mates came. So we did. We packed it out. And that was the start of our gigs. And for young teenage boys, it was a great way of meeting girls. It ticked every box. It was fun. Yeah.
Playing in the Cross as young kids, what do you remember of the Cross in those days? This is like late 70s, early 80s we're talking about here?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Literally. Yeah. And
so this is when the Angels are around and Midnight Oil starting out and In Excess maybe have gotten started.
It was the era when I know the Cockroaches, you mentioned how much we played. I remember nights when we played 3 gigs in one evening. We played the Samuel Grill on the North Shore, which is a pub. And then we did 2 uni balls, university balls, where you paid whatever you paid and you got food and grog and bands for the night. And one of the bands, and this is very early 80s, that followed us, and we're talking 1-ish in the morning, was In Excess when they first came over. The live scene was just vibrant, Chisel, the Mentals, just a great era.
Rolling Stone named that era. At that time, Rolling Stone said Sydney, in that time, had the most lively, vibrant live music scene in the world. Every pub in the inner city had a band playing on the weekend.
I remember years later, I was driving through and I'd point out to the kids, we used to play there. And they go, Dad, you can't possibly. It's like, no. Every pub was a venue. And you ask them what the Cross was like. I can remember we were loading out one evening in an alleyway, like no one's around. And Anthony put his amp beside the car we're loading into, went in like just to grab the guitar and came out and it was gone. And we're thinking, where were these guys? They abseiled down like your gear would get nicked very easily. So you became very protective, etc. But it was fun. Yeah.
Your dad had exposed you to the reality of drug use in the community.
Yeah.
When you're in that scene, and there was so much drugs and so much heroin in the Cross in those days, were you surprised when you saw it sailing around you and past you? And what did you make of all that?
No, I wasn't surprised purely because we'd grown up, seeing people who are addicted to substances, and I think that was the point. Dad used to say, if you picture a drug addict in your mind, like it's someone like Keith Richards and the rest of it, but it's your Auntie Nellie who's dropping Becks all the time throughout the day. So he kind of demystified the reality of it. I remember our eldest brother, Patrick, big lad and a funny bloke, and we were backstage at a gig in the Cross one night, and a bloke came in with like a doctor's bag almost, opened up and said, "Hey lads, what do you want?" And he had everything, right?
In a doctor, like a Gladstone bag?
Seriously. Yeah. It was part joke, part reality, right? And Patrick went, "Mate, are you a drug dealer?" Which is a funny thing to say. And everyone laughed, including the bloke. And he went, "I guess I am." He said, "Boy, have you come to the wrong place." And I guess that's the point. Once it's known, then they stop offering because they're wasting their time.
Yeah. Things were going really well, the Cockroaches, and you met a girl called Pauline.
Yeah.
How quickly did you fall in love?
I can remember, I was, 8 weeks into dating, thinking dare I use the expression, she's the one. which is a bit like, can this be the case? But she was gorgeous, funny, smart, everything. And, she'd come with me to gigs, and she was at Sydney Uni at the time. It was just awesome. I loved her from the word go. Yeah.
How old were you guys at that point?
20s. Actually, I met her in my teens. I wasted a year and then eventually asked her out. So very young.
Did you come from similar backgrounds?
Frighteningly so, right? I'm one of 7, the middle child of 7. She's one of 7, the middle child of 7. Pauline. I went to St. Joseph's in the city. She went to St. Joseph's in the bush. And here's where it gets weird, right? Both our fathers in their 30s should have died but survived. So Dad had a heart attack, as I mentioned before. They brought him back. Pauline's dad worked in the mines. He lost his arm in a mining accident. Should have bled to death, but the machine that it chewed his arm cauterized it. So, wow, what striking similarities. And I still don't know how the world works, but there are times when I'm thinking, wow, this was meant to be. Yeah, so I was the first in the 7 to get engaged, and it was just a cause of awesome celebration. And she was given my mum's auntie's rose gold wedding ring because we were the first. And, it was just a great celebration.
How badly did you both want kids?
From the word go. This sounds pathetic, but this is true. One of the earliest dates, I took her to see my auntie's twins. This was a date. And we said, I said, we've got to get down to St. Margaret's. My auntie's had twins, and she was pleased with the idea of it. Later on, I thought, God, that was strange to do, but she dug it. And so, even so, on our honeymoon, we're in Florence, and she bought a beautiful baby outfit, and they didn't know we were married, let alone pregnant, and we weren't, right? But they were kind of through broken English saying, so is this for your baby? And so, we don't have one yet. But that's how expectant we were, that we're going to have kids.
She wasn't even pregnant at that
God,
point.
No. But that's the sign, It's like, of course we will. And it will happen instantly. I have photo evidence. I got the receipts. We were in Rome, and the Pope is the Bishop of Rome. And there was this blocked off area and huge crowds. And we said, what's happening? I said, the Pope's going to visit this chapel. And it's like, wow. So we thought, got to wait for this. And eventually, they locked off everything. Then a guy came out with tickets saying, we filled the seats, but there are spares for people to stand. And we grabbed them. We went in, and we were absolutely the youngest people in there. And this is Pope John Paul, right? And he entered, made a beeline for the youngest people, which was us, patted Pauline on the head, and I had a camera just alongside her and got a snap. So it's like we thought, well, of course we're going to have a baby, and it was going to probably be named John Paul, but he wasn't. But anyway, so there were signs all around us.
So your son Luke did arrive.
Yes.
Unsurprisingly, perhaps unsurprisingly, that's a marvellous thing. And sometimes people are sort of, a bit flawed by this thing of becoming parents or becoming a father. Yeah. Sometimes they massively enjoy it, sometimes they don't. But how about you? How did you find it?
Oh, mate, if you think a royal wedding or birth is celebrated, Luke was the first field grandchild for my mum and dad.
Oh, right.
Man, oh, man, right. It's a wonder you didn't hear the celebration. So it was just joyous. That's the word, seriously. And
so being in a band, though, how did that work with you being able to spend time with him?
It actually is the best kind of gig, ironically enough, for being a father, because you're right. Of an evening, you're gigging, but you got the days there. We did tour for like a week or two away. But I had more time with my little ones than most guys in a regular job.
Then your family grew by one more. Your baby daughter, Bernadette, was born. What was she like as a little baby?
Oh, gorgeous. She had her mother's brown eyes and brown hair, a real gentle little one. Yeah, just beautiful. Babies are magnets of love and joy, and she was a normal baby, cried when she needed feeding or whatever else, but was quite peaceful, at peace. And Pauline would sing to her and was just so happy. Bernadette was born on January 20th in 1988. and was the joy of our lives. And Cockroaches were touring all the time in 1988, following our biggest year of platinum and gold album and the rest of it. So we were touring up in Queensland at the time, and for whatever reason, my dad had joined us on the road and was kind of helping us out a little bit. And then on September 2nd, 1988, he got a call. He was sharing a room with me and just came in to tell me that Bernadette had died. The night before she passed away, I'd rung Pauline because she was up visiting her parents in the Hunter Valley. And in those days before mobile phones, you'd have to call on a landline. I can remember this call because it was a real beautiful moment where Bernadette had just started to crawl a bit, and her grandfather, Ron, had taught her to say, ta-ta. So they put her on the phone to me, and she literally whispered, ta-ta, which is both beautiful and emotional to me, because that next day was the end of her life. Pauline had put her to bed that evening. She woke up at about 1:30, and Pauline went in to see her, and she was gurgling and happy, and Pauline just laughed and said, go back to sleep, Wicked. Just patted her to sleep, and that was it. And the next morning, and this is just a crazy coincidence, was the first National Red Nose Day in Australia. And Pauline and her dad are watching one of the morning TV shows, and all the hosts were wearing red noses. And Pauline's dad was an ex-miner, so lovely bloke, but a pretty straightforward, tough guy. And he said, oh, that's a bit silly, And Pauline said, it doesn't matter, whatever they can do, that's a worthwhile cause. She literally walked in to get Bernadette in the room, and as most parents, but particularly mothers, would know, you can just sense if there's something wrong. And she said, I just felt something was wrong. Bernadette was very still, and she'd passed away. Pauline picked her up and ran screaming into the kitchen, and was just calling out. The rest of the family came in, and her father threw the keys at her brother, and he raced in with Luke and Pauline's mum to the hospital. And shortly after they arrived, the doctor was able to say, look, she's died, she's dead. And he was also able to say to her that it was sudden infant death syndrome. And so that happened, and had this happened anywhere else, I'm kind of glad it happened in the country, which sounds a strange thing to say, but they allowed Pauline to nurse her for hours once they cleaned her up and just handed her back. And it was, she noticed nurses were wearing red noses on their wrists and stuff. And little Luke, who adored his little sister, they said, you want to nurse her? And he said no. He, even as a 2-year-old, as a baby really, he knew something was different. While I was flying down from Queensland, medical protocols kick in, and they had to take her away for a post-mortem. And one of the nurses said, look, sorry, but we really do have to get her to Newcastle. Like, we have to take her now. And Pauline, speaking as a mother, like her baby's still alive, pled with her. But she's never been anywhere without me. She's never been anywhere by herself. And it must have been a nurse who said, I'll go with her. And she didn't have to. It probably breached protocol, but God bless whoever that woman was. It wasn't logical, but it was just such a beautiful thing to do. And it was the first of many compassionate things that people did in our world then. And once I got the call, made arrangements to fly back to Sydney, and a mate of mine, John Watkins, picked me up at the airport, and he drove me up to the Hunter Valley, God bless him. And I said to him, I got to stop by the house and pick something up. And I really didn't, but what I wanted to do was go to her room, which she'd been in only days before. And I picked up her little lamb's wool blanket and smelled it, and I could smell her still. And I remember that vividly. And it's important to note, look, here I am at 64. This happened in 1988. And as you can hear, folks, it still just kills me. But that's a good thing. I don't ever want to be desensitised to what happened. There's a great metaphor when Pauline walked out of there with little Luke and her sister Helen. There were some gardeners out there just doing what they do. The sky was blue. These guys were laughing. And she thought, what is this? Our world has kind of ended. And life goes on. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. That's one of the saddest things I've ever heard on this program. How was your little boy Luke affected by all the grief that was going on around him? He was 2, wasn't he?
He was 2. And for those with a 2-year-old, and our youngest granddaughter is 2, mate, she knows everything that's going on. She picks up the joy, anything that's going on, she's aware of it. And so Luke, God help the poor little fella at the time, that hours on the day Bernadette died, and for many days, months after that happened, there were a lot of tears surrounding him. And as you can only imagine, after Bernadette died, Luke was never left alone or out of our sight. I remember having a cuppa in our dining room, which looked directly into the lounge room, and Luke was just playing with toys, sitting up. And, a little one can cry for lots of reasons. They need a nappy change, or they're hungry or tired or whatever. But there's the sound of them being hurt, and that cry, like they've jammed their finger or whatever. And he was in the middle room, but he emitted that cry. We raced in and we're looking at his hands and feet. There was nothing had happened to him. And we kind of figured that the trauma that poor little boy had been exposed to, it was him letting it out, because his words were pretty limited as a 2-year-old. And Red Nose Australia was very helpful to us. We had a parent contact, a woman who we'd call, like your sponsor kind of thing, and we'd go to meetings of other parents who'd lost a child. And she told us, look, he's 2. He knew his sister, and now she's not around. And there were, God help us, lots of photos of Bernadette around. He remembered her, of course, There might be the fear that also might happen to him.
You would never think of that, would you? But
No.
Of course, that makes sense.
Yeah. How do we deal with that in terms he would understand? So we used to say to him, Bernadette's gone, but she was weak, but you're strong. It won't happen to you, Luke. And he understood that. And then, of course, the siblings that followed Bernadette's passing, they grew up knowing of her, which was beautiful. And to this day, because the poor little one didn't ever celebrate a birthday. She died at 7.5 months. So we visit her grave at the anniversary of her birth and the anniversary of her death. And even I've got 3 grandchildren now, and it's beautiful. They came to the grave with us recently and laid flowers there, and beautiful little treasures. Raphael, our artist, would kiss her fingers and then put it on the little image of Bernadette on the graveside. Like, what a great thing for them to be aware of their auntie who's no longer with us, and they do ask questions, and, Felix was asking about what heaven is. It's like, oh, man. But that's great. And my dad's buried in the same cemetery, so we go visit his grave, and it's great that they're aware of their family, even those family who've passed. And certainly in the Catholic tradition, what I do believe is when they go to the afterlife, they join what's termed the communion of saints, their family.
Did you know how to grieve for her, or did you need help with that?
Oh, yeah, I needed help, full stop. my job was being in a band, so I went back on tour straight after the funeral, which was shortly after her death. And we met a Catholic priest, a guy called Father Paul Glynn, whose brother was also a priest, who went to Japan to help with grief in Nagasaki, for God's sake, and reconciliation. And so Father Paul, we knew as a family friend, and he took us through the spiritual side of it, and that did comfort us, which I've got to tell in itself we thought was not possible. And then advised us, which was brilliant advice, get as involved as you can with her funeral service. And so we have musical mates. There were hymns. There were, speaking Irish traditional song, a Celtic song called Wild Mountain Thyme. We'll all go together to pluck Wild Mountain Thyme. All amongst the blooming heather, will you go, lassie, go, right? Just a beautiful song. And same with the burial. When we took her tiny little hearse to the graveside, I said, I got to carry it. It's me, it shouldn't be anyone else. And now when I think of her funeral and even the burial, like literally the worst moments of our life equal with this passing, it nurtures me. They're beautiful memories. It was a beautiful service worthy of her. And that's also how you deal with the grief, is get involved with the celebration of her beautiful life, the mourning of it. It's totally appropriate and right to mourn, deeply mourn their death. And someone recommended to my wife, Pauline, that she get counselling. No one advised me because I'm a bloke, right?
Men never need counselling ever for anything that goes wrong, do they? That's the thing, yeah. No, we're the strong silent types, aren't we?
Yeah, or, as the cops and others used to do after dealing with trauma, get pissed or something like that. And so on the road, I was imploding. Life was not the same. And all the band, we're all in our 20s, for God's sake, and we knew nothing. So Bernadette's death was never brought up, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember going to a phone booth late at night, and I just rang Pauline and I said, Pauline, I'm fucked. I need help. And she went, right, okay. And she said, look, I'm seeing a guy called Dr. Peter Barr, grief counsellor, and I know it doesn't matter, but he'd lost one of his children, I don't know how, but it made a difference to me going, well, he knows, and it was brilliant. It saved me, and in the sense of, I don't know where I would have been, but I would have spiraled, yeah.
The music scene was changing anyway by the late 80s. That thriving music scene we were talking about shut down around about then. I think there was something about new fire laws for the pubs changed a lot, as I recall. And it made uneconomic for pubs to host bands, and the scene was changing rapidly anyway. Countdown was pulled off the air, and this terrible thing had happened.
Yeah.
Did it stop being fun after a while?
Yeah, but so was most of my life in a lot of ways. And Anthony, my youngest brother, is the canary in the world of life. And he was the one who actually first said, I'm going back to uni to finish off my degree. And I was like, how can you do this? And he said, but it's not fun anymore. And it was like, oh, man, I just didn't understand that, And
it's like a magic spell had been broken or something, was it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, everything had changed, as you mentioned. But because we had such a great name for being a popular band, we still had lots of gigs, toured the country, but, it had changed. And we started to naturally tour less. We still did things. And we're still driven. One of the joys in my life was still music. We formed a rockabilly band, which had Jeff, Anthony, most of the Cockroaches anyway. It was just because we loved rockabilly and we did that.
Rockabilly's really joyful too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the Cockies still had gigs as well. And then Anthony, I kid you not, this is the reason he formed the Wiggles. He made an album of kids' music to get him a job as a preschool teacher, which it did at Temple Emmanuel in the eastern suburbs. And then eventually he took it to the ABC purely because the ABC is the centre of early childhood entertainment, like the home of play school, et cetera, et cetera. And as luck would happen, coincidence, whatever it is, a woman named Meryl Gross, who used to be at Festival, which had the Cockroaches, it was her first week on the job at ABC Music. And in her first week, there should be a little plaque to Meryl. She signed the Wiggles and Lee Kernaghan, two of the biggest sellers of all time, and still going, by the way. They were so unique and zealots of early childhood music. And, yeah, they made great music from the word go.
Meanwhile, your life had taken a very different turn. You went to work for the Supreme Court of New South Wales. What was your gig there, Paul?
A gopher is the term for it, but tipstaff. I was a
tipstaff?
Tipstaff to
that sounds a bit medieval.
Judge. It is. You literally bang on the door and have a staff, and you wear, a black robe, and you're a gopher for the judge. And it was a fascinating job.
You were involved in the Wood Royal Commission into police corruption, weren't you? Did that mean you had a front row seat for those proceedings?
Yeah, the judge was then appointed as the Royal Commissioner into New South Wales Police Service. And thankfully, he took me along. He recommended me for an admin role, literally ordering things for our investigators like bulletproof vests, Glock semi-automatic pistols. Our investigations team would be interviewing crooks in jail. And you clearly don't want to be known as someone talking to the police or investigations to the Royal Commission. So they would have these briefcases, which were recording devices. And I go home, Pauline hears everything in my life, still to this day. And this is the first time I thought, oh, I'm working in a very different place. Anyway, so I told her about this amazing gear that I'm doing, ordering and whatever else. And I caught the train home the next day. And she goes, oh, my God, the ladies at Playgroup wouldn't believe the gear you're ordering.
You got to watch those playgroup circles. They're not known for being terribly continent with information like that.
No,
right.
So note to self, I thought, okay, I'm not sharing it. I'm just shutting this down.
Right.
Because we're investigating cops. We knew they knew how people looked at and some did surveillance and all this kind of stuff.
And quite frankly, working around the cross in those days, in a band, you're kind of aware of what the police were like in those days around the cross.
And Trevor Haken, who I got to know actually, was one of our key witnesses. He was a good cop at one stage, but their way of managing crime with lack of resources, okay, we'll let you go. We give the green light to you guys to go ahead, but we need information on your competition kind of thing. The Commission did things differently. So normally if you go to a police station, back then, though, in the mid-90s, everyone would know our surveillance guys. They'd be in civvies. They still look like cops, but they'd be in civvies, right? And everyone would know them. And what would happen in the days where there were corrupt police in quite a few divisions and areas, they would warn local crooks to say, hey, by the way, you're under surveillance. This is what the guy looks like. So a lot of things were blown. So the director of operations there, who was ex-Scotland Yard, said, our surveillance team, no one's going to know what they look like, where they operate, etc. But we need a liaison to legally sign for the gear, give them their equipment, etc., etc. And for whatever reason, the judge recommended me to be that. So I was the only civilian in the investigations team. And it kind of worked on a number of levels. Because if people saw me and knew, oh, that's the guy from the Cockroaches, they're not going to say, well, he's obviously working for the Royal Commission. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, right. So that was cover in a way? Yes, good cover for you.
And then we had a guy flown out from Washington, Australian military, to advise us on security. And so he interviewed everyone and said, so what do you do, Paul? And I explained my job, and he said, and how do you get to work each day, and da-da-da. He said, I got to say, if I was outside targeting the Commission, I'd target you because you got a lot of information. You got, this, that and the other. I went, wow. And he said, so you need to dry clean yourself when you come to work. I said, what's that? And this is a real surveillance thing. All of us, if you're catching the train, you pretty much go into the same carriage, same seat, same time, da-da-da-da. He said, do you need to change that? Get off at different stations, see if anyone else follows you, all this kind of stuff that you then made part of your daily routine. And he said, also, you need a new identity. And so I went to a particular person at the RTA, was issued a licence and got credit cards under another name, for God's sake.
You've been playing in one of Sydney's most popular pub rock bands. You had a kind of a public profile nonetheless.
Yeah, but that was there just in case.
Right, just in case.
And just absolutely just in case. And I kid you not, our PA guy, our sound guy, was of Lebanese background. Lovely bloke. And like everywhere, your agency would get your gigs and then gigs would come to you. And he said, hey, mate, there's a party we're going to do. It's going to be bloody brilliant. They're paying this, a bottle of whiskey on every table, da-da-da. It sounds like, oh, you beauty. Good on you, eh? Thanks, mate. And we booked it in and looking forward to it. And I said, oh, tell me now, what time do you have to turn up, blah, blah, blah. He said, oh, it's a big, well-known Lebanese family, the Bayers. right? And
Oh, the Bayer family,
yes.
right.
And I went, whoa, it's great, thanks, Ray. I'm thinking, geez. And I'm thinking also, every movement is going to be photographed or videoed at the
You
time.
can't possibly do that gig, can you?
I couldn't. And so I met with the judge and explained everything. And he wrote back, no worries, rock on, Paul.
Oh, yeah, it was okay.
He didn't see a problem with it.
Right.
That's the thing, actually. And the
Right.
more you realise what fair income, really good surveillance people do, you go on with your normal life.
Right.
They
Otherwise,
don't-
that looks sus. If you were
Yeah.
to cancel, that might have been a
Yeah,
bit sus.
fascinating time.
So while you're having this kind of gripping insight into corruption, police corruption in New South Wales, at the same time, the Wiggles
Yes.
are becoming enormous, massively huge.
Yes.
What was your involvement?
Oh, well, in the earliest of days, it still is actually a family business. So all my kids and my sister's kids, we were the crowd in the Wiggles dancing videos, and it was great. They were very much into the natural way. So as long as kids weren't crying in a clip, they could walk the wrong way, walk off. It didn't matter, which was great because parents love seeing that reality. So I assisted Dorothy in the very first Dorothy the Dinosaur clip. I was in the suit. And
You were Dorothy?
of course I was, yeah. And
I'm talking to Dorothy right now.
back in the early 90s, the very first clip. And here's the thing. Nowadays, they brief within an inch of your life, the early childhood basis, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, we're just shooting a clip. Bring your kids, they'll be in the audience. We need you to jump into the Dorothy outfit. I went, yeah, sure. Right. You said yes to everything. And so my moves were more Mick Jagger than Dorothy the Dinosaur, swinging the white purse around in the air. And I played every character in those earliest of days.
So Dorothy was a bit more rock and roll in those early days?
Oh, yeah, very much so. And you learn that's an early childhood thing, you know. Those preschool teachers, they'd hold up a puppet. The kids would see the teacher put a puppet on their hand, but they would then say, okay, that is a giraffe talking to me. And after the Supreme Court, I'd had a good experience working with lawyers, so legal things didn't worry me. And there was a good learning from the commission, but also the years in a band that I took with me when I became the Wiggles manager. If it's a legal question, get a lawyer. If it's a financial question, get an accountant. Register your trademarks, all that kind of stuff, which sounds like common sense, but there wasn't a lot of it. And I lived the experience of being in a band and sometimes getting ripped off and people lying to you.
Really? In the rock and roll industry? That happens?
I'm going to shock you there, yeah.
Oh, dear. I'm shocked. Shocked, sir.
So,
Right.
but it was a running start, so I booked their gigs. I was booking their gigs in clubs right around the country, and then we moved from clubs and RSLs to entertainment centres, and that was the first step.
And given that you were a man dealing with severe, terrible grief,
Yeah.
making gigantic crowds of children sort of ecstatic and happy and dancing and singing, what effect did that have on you, being part of that phenomenon?
Oh, it was a real positive experience for me. One of the reasons the Cockroaches folded and the Wiggles started was Bernadette's death. For most people that lose a child for any reason, stillbirth, miscarriage, whatever, that's kind of it. Whereas the first Wiggles album was dedicated to her. My little ones were now growing up with the Wiggles. And yeah, it was great. The job was entertaining and engaging children. It was a joyful gig. It is a joyful thing, you know, and I was entrusted with booking them, eventually directing and producing most of their content in the years I worked for them, and was part of that great wave of breaking them internationally. It's just an incredible, joyous ride.
You were eventually asked to help build a program for fathers who've lost children to SIDS and for other reasons as well. How did you go with that, Paul?
Good. And to this day, if I'm asked anything from Red Nose Australia, I say yes, because I know what's at stake and that people need help. And blokes are hopeless at asking for help, and it causes real problems. The great majority of marriages break up after the death of a child for any reason, and they need to be shown that it's okay to ask for help. So a couple of years back, they said, we're building an asset for fathers. Can you help us? I said, anything you want. And they had a list of things. I wrote an article, I did podcasts, did interviews, and it was great. But I did weeks of it, and I actually found myself down in a hole, like it had happened yesterday. me having said since 1988 that it's a good thing to ask for help and the rest of it, I was back going, geez, I need help again. And I went and got counselling again.
How was it this time to get counselling? What kind of advice did you get finding yourself in this kind of well of grief a second time round?
Yeah, it is different, but a lot of it's in how you deal with everything, let alone grief. You look at yourself, and she was able to point out to me things that they go, once she does, you go, oh, yeah. For example, it's a bit of a family thing, but she said, you don't really rest. You do everything and crash. You need to build rest parts in your day, moments of quiet, moments of reflection, etc.
So you were a workaholic for a bit in order to cope, were you?
Yeah. That's it, actually. And so it was good to look at myself that way and the way I deal with things, you know, because I'd left the Wiggles after 24 years and my wife had retired from working in a high school. So it was like, okay, we're going to travel and we're going to do this stuff. And then COVID kicked in, right? And so there's a statement I used, I'm over. Like that's the way I felt in my darkest times. Like I've stopped my job, which is a very bloke thing as well. You are what your job is kind of vibe, you know. And so the other good thing with counselling with this woman was she said, Bernadette's like a whole time in itself, but tell me about her. More importantly, bring me photos of her. And that process was like blubbering experience. I was like, oh, my God, how am I going to be doing this? Just picking the photos, you know, was emotional. But you got beautiful images of Bernadette you just don't get to show anyone. So it turned from what I was not looking forward to the best session I've ever had with anyone, medically or psych, whatever you want. Because I was saying, here she is sitting up, here she is beaming at her mother. I bloody loved it. You know what I mean? So that's the kind of stuff where, yeah, you free yourself up with various things. And Jimmy Barnes is a guy I've known since the earliest days. The year after Bernadette died, we did a concert for awareness of sudden infant death, but also for Red Nose Australia. And he was one of the first guys to say yes. And he was and still is huge, popular guy. And he'd nearly lost his daughter, Ellie Mae. She was born prematurely with cerebral palsy. So he was aware how close he was to going through that. And so he's remained a mate, and we worked together, the Wiggles and various other things. And when COVID kicked in, he rang me, and this is another good tips for anyone, let alone blokes. He said, how you doing? Oh, good. No. How you doing? What are you doing? I said, oh, nothing really. He said, mate, you love music. You should be doing music. I've got a studio. Why don't you come down here? I mean, man, oh, man, right? That real practical help, calling someone. So I've learnt that also from a mate to not only say SMS, how you going, but actually followed up a bit more than that. He knew I wasn't doing well and he spoke to me, which is a huge thing, you know? So there's a lot of good lessons I've learned along the way. And that's why to this day with Red Nose Australia, not only do they do safe sleeping and have reduced the rate of SIDS in Australia, and they do research into miscarriage and stillbirth, but the other reason for existence is helping people who have lost a child for any reason. I'm the living proof of that.
And what about disasters that don't happen? I mean, I had my kids about some 15 years later than you. And the science on this, thanks to funding, was so much more advanced.
Yes.
And we got really good advice to help prevent SIDS. Red Nose Day is fun, but it leads to some serious outcomes, I think, doesn't it?
Oh, well, we can actually put a number on it. Since Bernadette died in 1988, and I think the year after or two, they started their safe sleeping campaign, which was based on scientific evidence-based research. And there are a lot of triggers. Overheating's one. So we were taught when Luke and Bernadette were born to place your baby on their belly. So you're now told to put them on their back.
That was really made clear to us right at the outset.
And keep the cot clear.
Yeah, we were told that as well, keep the cot clear, yep.
And this can be a sensitive topic because parents do things the way they love to do or that was handed down, but co-sleeping's another risk because they can roll over and smother them and the heat rises, all that kind of stuff. So they've reduced the incidence of SIDS through their safe sleeping campaign by 85%. And so that's 12,000 lives. So put a number on. There are 12,000 people out there, had they not introduced this, that would have died.
One of the hard things that people who've lost a child like you face is that, you'll be at a party somewhere or a dinner party and someone say, how many kids you got? How did you manage that, and how are you managing that conversation?
Yeah, that's interesting, and a really good point, because even till, I don't know how you define recent, but I'm now at 64, cool with saying I've got 5 kids, and that's it. Most people, they don't delve into inquire, and if they do, I'll say Luke, Bernadette, Claire, Joseph and Dominic. I just go down the list. For a while there, I couldn't, I was torn, but yeah, I'm cool with that. It takes a long time. On the days of wallets and that, I'd open my up a wallet and I'd have her photo there in the wallet, Bernadette's. And people serving you would go, oh, who's that? And I said, oh, that's my daughter Bernadette. Oh, isn't she beautiful? I loved hearing that.
I love talking to you as well, Paul. And thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Paul Field is former manager of the Wiggles, former member of pub rock band The Cockroaches, and ambassador for Sid's Red Nose Day.
This is Conversations with Richard Fidler. You can find more conversations anytime on the ABC Listen app.
Today's conversation with Paul Field was made on the lands of the Gadigal people. Producer was Meggie Morris. Executive producer is Nicola Harrison. I'm Richard Fidler. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to a podcast of Conversations with Richard Fidler. For more Conversations interviews, please go to the website abc.net.au/conversations.